What most people call an identity crisis might just be an identity evolution. Like you, I've had my fair share of identity crisis moments. These are normal human emotions, but what feels abnormal, especially these days, is how fast these feelings seem to be hitting all of us at once. Much of it has to do with social media, which I've shared about here the last couple of episodes. And AI is, of course, accelerating all of this, flattening multiple industries, pulling the rug out from under identities that used to take decades or maybe even generations to wear out. Anthropic, founder of Claude.ai, published this in March 2026. Basically, if your line of work falls within any of these blue regions, AI is going to eat a significant share of your industry. And yes, this can feel like a crisis. A lot of the comments and responses I get from people would indicate this. It reflects that. But here's the thing. Crisis only asks you to survive. Evolution requires that you become someone new. Now, I'm no therapist, but I've learned a few things over the years from my very own school of hard knocks. So I would like to share a couple of these things with you. There are two broad ways that an identity can shift. Number one, you can shed an identity. And number two, that identity can get ripped from you. Shedding an identity is a bit like unbundling a child from his winter outfit. When my nephews were little, we'd often play in the snow and their outfits weighed as much as they did. So before we leave the house, of course, I would ask, hey, do you have to pee? Are you sure you don't have to pee? They're like, no. I bundle them all up, like 15 layers of clothes. And obviously what happens next? As soon as I zip up their jacket, Uncle Mike, yeah, I have to pee, right? So there would commence the shedding of every piece of winter clothing ever made in history, right? My sister would bundle these kids up. And shedding is a lot like that. It can be a pain, it can be uncomfortable, but it's not really as much of a crisis because you're the one doing it. You're growing. The thing, whatever that is, stops fitting and you're ready to move on and you're glad to see it go. When an identity gets ripped from you, it's like you woke up in bed to a SWAT team bursting through your door, flashbangs going off to grab you by the arms, tearing you out of bed, zip tying you behind your back, drag you across the floor, kick you out, throw you out into the snow outside, and just leave you there. There's no winter clothes at all. Now, I'm not going to minimize how heart-wrenching and traumatic this can be. There is real grief there, but looking back, I can see how much it would have helped me to understand which was which as I was going through it. So let me tell you what I mean. I went through 3 evolutions in 4 years, and it was pretty exhausting. From 2012 to 2016, I went through 3 of these evolutions in a rapid succession, and they were church, work, and wife. That was the order they happened in, and I didn't have language for the first 2 at the time. I had spent a good chunk of my young adult years at church. I went to seminary after undergrad. I worked full-time at a church in Connecticut for 4 years as their worship pastor, and we recorded a lot of albums. I hosted a lot of conferences. I would speak. I performed at some pretty large events over the years. And in 2009, after meeting somebody who was quite literally at the top of the mountain in that industry, it hit me this wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. It took some time for me to muster up the courage to make a change, but 2 years later, in 2011, I made the change and I left that position. Here's the thing, leaving a church staff isn't just like leaving a job. It's leaving an identity. It's leaving a worldview. It's leaving a community. It's leaving the way an entire group of people think about what your life is supposed to be and how they understand you. To them, you're not switching careers. You are walking away from a calling. It can register like a Cold War defection, right? Now, there are definitely a lot of people who assume something must have been wrong with me. Maybe I had some sort of moral failing or a spiritual crisis or a midlife panic or something like that. The kinder people, I think most of them thought I was just kind of confused. And the less kind people felt like I was rebelling against God. Very few thought what was actually true. It just didn't fit anymore. Now, at the time in my 30s, I thought it was an identity crisis, right? This is also because that church, that worldview, that community, that way of life was also tied to, number 2, my work. So when I left Connecticut, when I left that position and moved back to New Jersey, I went back to a job that I had in my early 20s, which was teaching at an after-school academy prepping students for the SATs. And obviously I felt like I was going backwards. I'm like in my mid 30s and I'm taking the same job I had when I was in my 20s. It was hard to stomach. Now, long story short, I eventually took over the marketing for the company. We did really, really well. And I started a side hustle that grew into what I do today. I've shared this story elsewhere in depth. It's also in the front half of my book, You Are the Brand. So I'm not going to go into it there, but here's a lot of stuff that I haven't talked about before. This was a big shift, not just for me, but for my wife. And she had said at the time, hey, I wish you could just work a regular job and make $100,000 a year. And, that was a lot more money back then than it is now. And so I did. I made it happen. I made it happen. Better yet, I made more money than that, the most I'd ever made in my life. And I became my own boss. I thought this was going to be great for us. We bought a 4-bedroom house in the town we both grew up in to go to high school, or we went to high school. And by all counts, this was where we're going to start a family, right? But 6 months after I started my business and 10 years into our marriage, she told me she didn't want to be married anymore. This was not a shedding. This was a ripping. And I used to tell my therapists and counselors that I felt like she was ripping my soul apart the way you would rip pulled pork, like slowly, deliberately, strip by strip, except for this was done maliciously. With the church and my job, I had the luxury of choice because I was the one leaving. I was the one walking out the door. The marriage really was a crisis. But here's what I want to drive home for you. Real crises and identity evolutions aren't opposites. Crisis is just what you have to go through. It's just what something costs you on the way through. The result, if you do the work, is evolution. In the middle of all that chaos, a recurring picture kept coming to my mind's eye. I was in a car accident on a highway. The car was about to catch fire. There was like fire everywhere. And so I felt like I needed to get away from this wreck. It was going to explode at any second. I was just crawling away from the wreck. The problem was I also had this huge gaping wound in my chest, right? Like a shotgun blast. And every few months, this picture would come back and hit me when I would like journal or meditate or just even have dreams about it. And every time I had that, as time progressed, the car got a little further away. I was a little further away from the accident. It took me a little while to realize that the distance between me and the car accident was time. Time was slowly marching on. No matter what I did, time was going to pass. And it was, that what happened was going to be further and further in the rearview mirror. The problem is the shotgun blast in my chest didn't heal with time. It was right in the heart and soul. Time was going to pass, but the wound wasn't going to close with time. I had to tend to it. Now that means you own your own stuff. You own up to your own faults. You try to see things from another person's point of view. You try to see the big picture. But it also meant, at least for me, that I drew a line in the sand when things just got ridiculous and unreasonable. And again, not to go into all the personal details, but all of that is involved when you set down the path towards really owning your stuff, right? And healing. Now, clients often open up to me about challenges they're facing outside of work or business. This is not a surprise because I would say most business problems are a personal problem in disguise. And they often ask, especially when they're going through hard things, should I just drop what I'm working on? Should I drop what I'm doing for a few months while I heal? And my answer is always, I can't tell you what to do, but what I do in those situations, I slow down, but I don't stop. Unless the wound is physical, like you physically have to get better, emotionally, I just feel like I just keep moving ahead. Here's why. Emotional healing doesn't happen on a schedule the way a broken bone does. A doctor can set a fracture. There is no doctor who can set a soul. Sometimes work is the more honest container. Work gives you a hard start. It gives you a hard stop. It gives an especially driven person something to point their hands at while the deeper work is going on, quieter underneath. So for me, that's always been the case. Now, the last couple of episodes, I've shared about 3 forces that I see reshaping all of us at once: the tabloidification of the internet, visibility fatigue, And now this identity crisis versus identity evolution. I don't see these three things as different. I see them as the same earthquake hitting three separate fault lines at the same time. That's why it can feel so disorienting right now. Now, if you feel like you're in crisis right now, whether it's personal, whether it's work, whether it's a shredding or a ripping, two things. Number one, my heart really goes out to you. I hope that I've shown you in this video that I've been through my own things, and I hope that my words in some way, shape, or form have brought you some sort of comfort or peace or encouragement. And number two, I hope that eventually you can see this as an opportunity to evolve, to grow, even if it's hard right now. Again, I'm no therapist, but this is what I've learned. It seems to go like crisis, survival, grief, growth equals evolution, right? That's just what I've seen in my own life. So I'll end this video with one thing I often say to friends, colleagues, or clients who are going through these evolutions. I wonder if a caterpillar freaks out when it's growing wings, right? You might just be growing wings. You might be in the cocoon, and I know it's a little rough, but I just encourage you to keep going. I'll see you on the other side, butterfly. If you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed this series, the last couple of videos, these last three, which I'll link to the other two here down below, it would mean a lot to me if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video, even leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what resonated. And I'm going to continue talking about some of this stuff in future videos, but these three things are things that I see really reshaping what it means to share our ideas, to get our work out into the world, and to really evolve and to grow. More is required of us. I know there's a lot changing, but I see this as an opportunity to step in and step up and evolve and grow. And so if you're along for the ride, I'd love to have you. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, leave a comment, and I will hopefully see you on the next episode.